And the next policy is 4351, right? Yes, 4351. In gathering information, I asked for legal, implications of all of this. I looked at some of the data and added the proposed language of students under age 8 or under grade 3 have a right to have a parent or other representative present at the informal hearing. They have a right. It is not necessarily implying that. Actually, that's a discussion piece. So I'm going to move that we move this on to the board for approval. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion. Yes, that's great.
Okay, so wondering if you had any guidance from our, from Ms. Barnum and her department on this wording.
I spoke with the attorney.
So this is the attorney's words, not.
The attorney's words and in discussion.
Okay, so I would like to ask a question, if I may, of Ms. May. So, first of all, the words that were taken out, over in the deleted, they should be left in and struck out so that we can see where they are. That's one of those things that is just really hard to follow. I went back and looked at the old policy.
As did I.
So that needs to be there. But my question is, how would this affect you, Ms. May, and other of your principal colleagues at the schools if we were to do this?
It would be very, very difficult. Not all of our parents have phone numbers at work. So that's one thing that was the first thing that I thought of, is how many times we've tried to get in touch with parents to have conversations about attendance or even a positive phone call, but we don't have any way of getting in touch with them because we don't have a phone number that works. Another concern I have is with students that are bilingual or parents that are non-English speaking parents. I don't have anybody in my school who could stop what they're doing and come and interpret. So to have a parent, that would be a really, really challenging situation. The other thing is, when we're dealing with any kind of disciplinary situation, and it doesn't matter whether the child is in kindergarten or 5th grade, and I'm assuming probably in middle school and high school, we are having an informal conversation as part of the investigation process. And so if that would be considered a hearing, then that would essentially be saying that we can't talk to any children without their parent being present. So like, if there's a situation that happens between 2 kids on the playground, just to kind of sort through whatever the situation is, we have to talk to the children. And that's part of their due process rights for us to talk to them, but that would be considered the informal hearing. Like, I can tell in a conversation with the 2 kids what the situation is, and then I'm going to make my decision based on that conversation. It's not an interrogation, it's just trying to, figure out the facts as best we can from small children. Yeah, I mean, that would be very, very difficult for us to follow that all the time. I mean, just because we have challenges with getting in touch with parents.
I'm going to have Ms. Bradford and then I'll come to you.
May I ask Principal May a question? We have heard from a lot of advocates in the community that say that this policy would only affect about 13 children in the entire school district. And so I'm trying to marry two appearing to be opposite opinions. It's very challenging for me. The school district says, we can't do this. It'd just be too prohibitive. But they're saying to us, it's be only a tiny number of children that we're talking about. So how do I resolve that?
So I think just like we would do in our school, if there's, I've got 515 kids in my school, if there's something that only pertains to the 13, I'm only going to, I'm not going to put something in place for all 515 if there's only 13, right? And in the district, if it's the whole district.
I don't think that, I may have misspoken, that there's
There's 13
Of the number of
students.
children that are being suspended,
Only 13 of them are K-2.
yeah.
Right, right. So I think I would deal with that on a case-by-case, individual basis. School by school.
I have a couple questions. I'm not sure why we're using the word informal hearing. I don't think that's appropriate for what we are doing, because when we have a hearing, we're doing a level of suspension, which I think that can be confusing. So I think we should not use informal hearing, because when we go to a hearing, there's an actual process that Student Services uses for hearing. In addition, I'm not sure where that number of 13 comes from. That would be a violation if any person shared that they are using any type of disciplinary action and that it's 13. I would really want to know where that number came from, because that's inappropriate. For anyone to know how many kids are being, or whatever. I think, how do you resolve it? You have to trust the people who are sitting at the head of those schools. A lot of people are going to say things. We had some information that was sent to us, and we talked about safe schools. But if you're saying that every situation a parent's got to sit there before it's dealt with, that is, I'm going to just be honest with you. I don't understand the reason why. Where is it wrong? Where's the system broken? And I think that's where you employ the senior staff to go and investigate to see what's broken so that we bring things back. I've never known it to be where we're on the defense of what we're doing what's right for kids. And that's what actually happens every time. We're having to be on the defensive side of, this is what they're doing, this is not what Principal Mays is doing. Principal Mays is not doing that. This is not what the principal at the school is doing. But it appears to put the school district in defense when we create policies and not actually even speak to any of the principals. I would recommend you come to the next principals meeting. We have elementary breakout sessions, and you can sit down and you can speak with them in how it works and what does an actual due process look like, because all you're doing is a due process, and I shouldn't have to have a parent there to ask a question or to write. We don't do it at any time. So I think we're putting policies, or attempting to put policies in place, and we've not even asked the experts who sit at the head of their buildings.
Yes, my hand is up. Oh, I'm sorry.
Then perhaps we should table this until we can have a meeting with the principals and so on. Because for at least the last 2 years, we've had community members like the one sitting in front of us now who say, this is what's going on. And we've never fully responded to them and addressed every single one of their things coming from this, one of their points coming from the school district. And I tried to attempt that last meeting, and it didn't really work, and so we ended up in policy. So I would make a motion that we hold this, and we do talk to superintendents, and we do get to the bottom of what's being said.
Principals.
What is it?
You said superintendents.
Oh, I did, principals. And that we get to the bottom of this so that every single meeting we have, we don't have to have this presented with no answers. I would think that if I had a 4-year-old in the school district, that I would want to be called if my child was down in the office and was being questioned by adults. I can't divorce myself from that emotion as a parent, grandparent, and great-grandparent. But I want to get to the bottom of this, and I've taken in zero information other than what's been emailed all board. I have not met with anyone. I have not been prejudiced by anyone. So just go back and read your board emails if you want to see what people are saying. We get hundreds of emails about it. We get copious amounts of comments about it, and I want to get to the bottom of it. So I move that we postpone this until we can have discussions and find out. I mean, I do not disagree with you at all. I respect your opinion, but at the same time, I need to get to the bottom of where the truth really is.
Ms. Kramer?
So I would like to, I'm fine with doing that. I just want to call attention to the fact that Ms. Barnum puts relevant information in our board packet every week. And most recently, she addressed it, that they had audited the narratives of the behavior incidents, and found that we were just coding things differently. So before we start getting to the bottom of things, I think we need to trust the report that we're getting from our senior leadership, which, and we can go back, you look at the last one, and she keeps hers on a running thing. So we can go back and look for a whole year on what's going on. So I think it's unfair for us to, as we're trying to get to the bottom of anything, not to take in account the professional leadership and the data that is being presented to us from the district's point of view, the district's leader point of view, and maybe not spun. And I do also have the same concerns that Dr. Faust has, is that if people in the community know more than we know about cases, there's a serious problem of people telling things about students. And again, we're back into a personnel issue
Ms.
and a
Farley,
FERPA.
would you be able to speak briefly about some of the miscoding or the, not miscoding, but the coding differences?
So they're not miscoded, and I don't have the memo pulled up, but I'm going to go from memory. So as Ms. May is speaking about suspensions, for example, we have had situations where we have K-2 out-of-school suspensions that the narrative describes either a weapon or assault. We don't have any records of I don't recall a record of drugs. So, for example, assault, and the narrative will describe that, but the code used by the principal might be aggressive behavior. But in looking at the narrative, you see that the student either assaulted a fellow student, leading to injury, or assaulted the teacher, or in one case, had their hands wrapped around the principal's neck. And so what we do is we're not just looking at what it's coded to be, because the code is a drop down and you pick the one. And I'm having these conversations with principals too about if you're suspending for behavior that is assault, you need to code as assault. And many times I don't want to create the harshest code. I want a lesser code because they hate to put that in the student record, but they need some level of short-term suspension for the nature of the behavior. So in our audit, we did not find that principals are violating school board policy, and that's what I explained in the memo, and I've also explained that to our community partners in face-to-face meeting.
Ms. Mason? Can I note something parliamentary-wise? We haven't had a second on Ms. Bradford's motion, which I take as a motion to postpone to an indefinite
I
time.
was going to do, the next thing I was going to do was vote on the original motion and then move from there. So the original motion was to move this to the board.
Well, I think-
And then we have to vote on that, correct? And then I was going to go with her.
I think her motion supersedes. She has a motion to postpone
Okay.
indefinitely, and there hasn't been a second. And once you have a second, I'd like to make if I may, clarify some things. Ma'am, or you want a second
Do
first?
we have a second to postpone or to move this to the, you said the next policy meeting? Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. As a matter of clarification, Ms. May mentioned that she thought that this language would apply in the investigation phase, let's call it, when there's a scuffle, let's say at recess, I think you said. I don't believe the language reads that way. Rather, it's just at the informal hearing stage. In other words, there's already been an investigation, and now it's time for the administrator to decide whether to suspend the student, and before the administrator has that informal hearing, the parent are notified, the parents are given an opportunity to participate under this proposed language. So I don't read the language to apply to the, I'll call it the investigation phase of trying to figure out the facts.
right? What you want is you want a parent to be present for
When there's a scuffle,
no, for when we talk to children.
I would, personally, and if I had to vote today, I probably would vote that way. If the child is grade 3 or lower, before you suspend that child, I don't want the parent there. That's what I would feel as a parent, as a grandparent, and a great-grandparent.
So as part of
And I don't have enough information to vote today,
Right.
but if I'm forced into it, that's how I would
But
vote.
as part of the investigation or as part of
The suspension.
suspension?
Okay, because I'm reading.
They're separate.
Yeah, and it may be that we need to put in another something right through here, pre-suspension rights of the students, because this blue language right now says has a right to have a parent or other representative present at the informal hearing. And then it says at the hearing, student and parent or other representative, if applicable, shall be informed of the charges and the base of the accusations against them. So maybe we need to separate that out a little bit and make the language a little bit more clear, so that you know exactly what our intent is as a board.
I mean, it doesn't change anything for me, like,
How do you mean?
well, I mean, whether parents have to be there for the investigation part when we're speaking to their child, or for when we say, this is what's happened, so your child's going to have this consequence. If we can't get in touch with parents, or we don't have the way to communicate with parents, then the feasibility is equally as low.
You can't, so basically what she's saying, this all happens in one, it's not days.
Yeah,
It's-
this happens
If
in-
it happens, altercation happens at 10:40, the principal or administrator gets students, here's a document, I need you to give your side of the story, teacher has written up something, I'm looking at that, I'm giving this, who are your witnesses? It may take an hour, 2 hours. So what you're saying is that I can't talk to the student who was hurt or the student who hurt the other one, because there's not a parent there. It all happens in one swing. No, but what I'm saying, it happens all in one swing. There's not, I'm gonna take a day, and I'm going to interview this one, and then I'm gonna come back the next day, and it's all within hours. And sometimes it does take the entire day to do the entire investigation. If you have multiple sources of information, you're collecting that information, and sometimes it is at the end of the day when you make that decision to say, this is what the board policy states, and this is what I'm following, and I'm contacting mom and dad on the telephone, and I'm attempting to get in touch with them to let them know that the child has in-school suspension, the child has, 2-day out-of-school suspension, but it's all in one day, it's not multiple meetings, that's
Yeah, I mean, I might, while I'm talking to the student, I might say, all right, well, whatever the case may be, this is what's gonna be your consequence. I'm not going to stop that meeting. Okay, we're done talking. Now I've got to go call your parent to see if they can come here so that I can continue the rest of my sentence. And that's essentially what that would require.
And this is, the school level investigation is broken down in a different policy. In policy 4340, school level investigations, it is step by step broken down. And the term hearing is referring to where the, part one, the principal investigates the facts and circumstances related to the alleged misbehavior, and then including all the information. Number two, offer the student an opportunity to be heard on the matter and raise any defense the student thinks relevant. So we need to look at that policy if we're looking at 4340.
Okay. Well, I would like to say something briefly. I think that the intent behind this was so that there would be consistency across the schools. I understand that we need to trust our staff and our administration for sure. We also need to make sure that because there are different standards that people have, and there's some objectivity and subjectivity that we have to consider. Additionally, I don't believe it says it's a requirement for a parent to be present. I believe that it says that the parent, it does say present. But it doesn't say required, it's a right. So the efforts that are made is how I read it.
So what would change in what we do now?
Previously, the policy said they don't have the right to have a parent or a representative present, so that changes the word.
So oftentimes when you call the parent will say, I want to come up. And you're just like, sure, I will meet with you. So the parent has the right at that time too. I think what's happening is what we are trained on as administrators is different than what non-folks see it. And so you do offer all of those insights, and there's, again, I think it puts the school district on defense because we're having to defend. And again, I'm not sure of what principal isn't using the protocol to do due process, because basically all you're doing is due process. I just don't know, and I think, again, I do believe policy board members need to just talk to principals, because I think the entire situation needs to be understood. I don't think the board understands what happens, and that's not an insult. I'm saying that there is a policy in place and a protocol in place, and the only subjectivity that comes in is what's in the board policy that says I can give you 0 to 10 days. And so I may choose 1 day, or I may not choose any days, and someone may choose 10 days. That's where the subjectivity comes in, and it gives, but the board gives the administrator the wherewithal to make that decision, because there's a level of trust of you make the decision that this is the standard that we're going to follow, that they all have to do due process. They cannot do, you can't bring to J.C. Rose, we don't have the document which leads up to that if it goes back to the school. So there are layers that I don't think all of you know that go into place. So I think you should literally just have a discussion with elementary principals, and I mean, we have breakout sessions where it could be elementary, middle, and high health. So I think that'd be a great conversation for the board to have.
And that was part of my follow-up. And if we don't have time to do this today, but I would like to understand the layers, because when Dr. Faust was talking earlier, he said, at 10:40 there's an incident, and then 1 or 2 hours later. And I'm thinking, I have a 5 or 6-year-old sitting there for hours in distress. This is like scar you for life stuff.
No.
Okay.
No.
So I would like to see, give me a typical, this happens at this time, we suspend at that time, or we decide not to suspend. Walk me through what it looks like.
I mean, it really does depend. Like, we try to handle disciplinary matters as soon as possible. I would never have a kid just sitting in my office. That doesn't make any kind of sense, and we don't have a babysitting service in our office, right? Everybody has a job that they're trying to do. So until we can get to the student and the disciplinary situation, they have to be in a classroom learning, right? And then when we can, my assistant principal may not be available, I may not be available, but when one of us is available, then we'll go through Educator's Handbook and kind of triage, like, what's the most important thing that we've got to get to first. So if there's a major incident, we're going to go to that first, and we'll handle that whole situation. Sometimes it might take 2 hours. Sometimes it might take 10 minutes. It just depends. And as soon as we handle the situation, then we're on the phone calling the parent, and then we're on to the next situation. But there isn't any time, at least in my building, where there's a child sitting for hours on end in queue waiting to be dealt with. That's just not the way it happens. And I would find it hard to believe that any school has a queue system like that.
Would you have a child in, question them, and then send them back to class, and then a couple hours later, there might be more discussion?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if I have a student that I'm asking them, I'm asking them about something that happened, and then I send them back to class, and then another student comes and talks to me, and I find out something different, then I might send that student back, and then the first student comes back. I mean, it's, and it doesn't really matter whether they're K2. When we're talking with children, we're talking to children. So I mean. And if you've never had a conversation or tried to investigate something with little kids, I mean, the stories can be way not even close to the truth. So, that's kind of what we're trying to tease out is what parts of this are fact and what parts of this are embellishments, or, how do we figure out what actually happened here from all of the different sides. And sometimes that takes time, and sometimes it doesn't take any time.
So thank you for that explanation, and thank you, Dr. Faust, for the offer to invite us to the principals meeting. Can all three of us come to that and listen in at the same time without violating any
No,
open
we
meeting?
can set up, no, we would set up a time where you could come and one could be with elementary, one could be with middle, I know you're looking at one, but
Yeah.
you could all circulate because we have the breakout session. When's our next principal's meeting? And those aren't closed meetings.
Right, that's what I was saying, I didn't want to,
But
April meeting.
I believe that we all three could come, as long as we're listening, as long as we're there to learn.
But we
and
could
we're not
actually-
deliberating on board business. I know you and I disagree on this, and we always will, but I'm going with what the law says.
But we could have it where you could ask questions and you're in different rooms at different.
I don't think that's necessary.
But I would definitely need you to ask questions for it.
Well, April the 11th is our principals meeting, and we do the level meetings in the afternoon. So we will schedule a time for board members to come in and have time to talk with the different levels. I think that's what Dr. Faust is saying. That way you are getting the perspective from the middle school, the elementary, and the high school. So,
I think all we're talking about today here is grade 3 and under, so I'd like to focus on that.
okay.
But I really want you to hear how it works because it's not, you're going to hear issues. Of course, yes, the focus will be elementary. You can all talk about elementary, but I think you need to understand the process honestly doesn't change. The conversation changes because of the differentiation in how you interview a 5-year-old or preschooler versus how you may interview a senior.
Yeah, the level of maturity of the student just changes radically as you go up past 3rd grade. And
I think it would
that's-
also give you
that's the
some
concern.
knowledge. It would give you guys more insight, you know? I mean, I know we're just talking about elementary, but if you're gonna be there, actually, to have that insight from the different levels, I think would really help you as you do your job on the board, and would really allow you to advocate, communicate better. So just something that we would definitely offer up for you guys to be able to
If
talk
I'm
to
gonna
all
be
three
there, I just want
levels.
to be there for the whole thing and use it as a learning experience for the whole thing.
Okay, all right.
another question.
Yes, Ms. Crooks.
So, I think from what I've heard is we were having a little bit of disconnect on the words informal hearing versus just conversation, investigation. So I think that as we're listening to the principals, we need to think about those two words. And also, as I'm looking through here, it says children age 8 or under grade 3. So under grade 3 does not mean grade 3. It means second, first, kindergarten with that. So I think we need to clarify those points too, as we're coming back. I mean, this isn't for today, this is for us as we're listening,
Ms. Bradford?
if that's what we want to go with.
And I agree. I'd like to go back to something we were talking about a few minutes ago with Ms. Barnum, coding. Because I've heard at the call to audience that so many students were suspended for, just whatever. And yet we have policy that it's drugs or alcohol, assaults, threats, weapons, bomb threats, terrorist threats, or clear threats to safety. So for this last year, the ones where the coding was more minor than what the read-up said happened, you mentioned something about the choking. Can you go back and recode those? Or at least say, we had 12 of these, and looking at them, I mean, I know you gave us a report just the other day, but I want to put it out to the public, because there's so much discussion on this, and the fact that I was very concerned that we had policy that said only these things, and yet we're seeing children on the paperwork that says they were, suspended for, talking back.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
so-
can we correct this?
Yes, for current year, absolutely, and that's information that principals have been getting, so make sure you're coding accurately toward what the policy says. Now, that doesn't mean that they violated policy, but it makes the data reporting match, and then you don't have to necessarily dig through the audits to determine that it is compliant. So that's been direction that principals have been receiving. But like I said, I did have a face-to-face meeting and explained our auditing process, and then we've continued the same auditing process into this school year. So that was communicated to our advocacy group but certainly want to be able to communicate that at the will of the board, however you think that's going to be most helpful.
And in the updated, well, I won't say the updated, in the latest memo that we sent was, the board received this on Friday, policy 4351, data on K-2 out-of-school suspension and auditing narratives of the behavior incidents were reviewed of any K-2 out-of-school suspension that was not coded for assault, weapon, or drugs. In auditing the incidents, the narratives describe the reasons for the suspensions as assault. Therefore, the suspensions are appropriately assigned and are not a violation of policy. This was communicated in person to the leaders of the advocacy group claiming principals have violated policy. Principals have been directed to ensure the assault code accompanies any assignment of out-of-school suspension for assault instead of using a lower level code. We sent this to the board on Friday.
All right, so if there is no further discussion, the motion was to hold 4351 in policy. Let's vote on it. All in favor? Did you have anything else?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a note that we should be looking at policy 4340 in conjunction
Yes.
with 4351. So I think we need to
Let
just,
me amend that we pull 4340 in, if it's my
Yeah, I
motion that
think-
we're amending, because I don't even know where we are.
It's been
Are we on an amendment, or are we on the, what are we doing?
You've got the motion to postpone until the next policy committee meeting.
Okay, and then I say that let's drag 4340 into this and add it to the agenda as well.
Well, the chair can put that on the agenda
Right.
at the next meeting.
Okay.
It's the chair's prerogative.
I would recommend you also look at 4341, which is parental involvement in student behavior issues. All those could go hand in hand.
All right, so the motion is to postpone, leave this in policy, 4351, leave in policy until the next policy meeting. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. That passes 2 to 1.
Who voted no?
Myself.